When the electrode conductor is bonded in the meter socket, the service conductors must indeed be a 4-wire service. This requirement stems from the principle that the grounded conductor, often referred to as the neutral, must be bonded to the electrode grounding conductor at only one location within the service. Let's break down why this is crucial. In a typical electrical service, the utility provides power to a building through service conductors. These conductors run from the utility transformer to the service equipment, which usually includes a main disconnect and overcurrent protection. The meter socket is the point where the electrical usage is measured for billing purposes and is often located before the main disconnect. The electrode grounding conductor connects the service equipment to a grounding electrode system, such as a ground rod, a metal water pipe, or a concrete encased electrode. This grounding system provides a low impedance path for fault current to return to the source, helping to protect people and equipment from electrical shock. The grounded conductor, or neutral, is intentionally connected to ground at the service entrance. This connection is what establishes the reference point for the electrical system and allows for the proper operation of overcurrent protection devices like circuit breakers. Now consider a scenario where the meter socket is located some distance away from the main service panel, as described. If the electrode grounding conductor is bonded to the grounded conductor in the meter socket, it effectively establishes the grounding point there. According to electrical codes, specifically the National Electrical Code or NEC, the grounded conductor should only be bonded to the electrode grounding system at one point in the service. This is to prevent circulating currents on the grounding path, which can create noise and potentially dangerous voltage differences. If the electrode grounding conductor is bonded in the meter socket, the service conductors running from the meter socket to the main service panel inside the building must include a dedicated grounded conductor, which is part of a 4-wire system. The 4 wires consist of 2 ungrounded conductors, often called hot wires, a grounded conductor or neutral, and an equipment grounding conductor. The equipment grounding conductor provides a path for fault current to return to the source without energizing metal parts of the electrical system. The main service panel inside the building will have a main disconnect, which is the primary means of shutting off power to the entire building. At this main service panel, the grounded conductor is connected to the neutral busbar, and the equipment grounding conductors are connected to the ground busbar. However, because the grounded conductor is already bonded to the electrode grounding conductor at the meter socket, it should not be bonded again at the main service panel. This single-point bonding ensures that all grounding and bonding paths are properly coordinated and that there are no undesirable circulating currents. If the service were not a 4-wire system in this scenario, meaning it lacked a dedicated equipment grounding conductor running with the service conductors, any fault current would have to travel back to the source through the grounded conductor. This is problematic because the grounded conductor is also carrying the normal unbalanced load current, and any additional fault current could overload the grounded conductor and create a potentially dangerous situation. Furthermore, without a dedicated equipment grounding conductor, there would be no low impedance path for fault current to quickly trip the overcurrent protection devices. This could result in a sustained fault and increase the risk of electrical shock or fire. The NEC mandates a 4-wire service in these situations to ensure that there is a separate and dedicated path for fault current to return to the source, independent of the grounded conductor. This dedicated path is provided by the equipment grounding conductor, which runs with the service conductors from the meter socket to the main service panel. To summarize, if the electrode grounding conductor is bonded to the grounded conductor in the meter socket, the service conductors must be a 4-wire service. This is to comply with the single-point bonding requirement and to provide a safe and effective path for fault current to return to the source. The 4 wires consist of 2 ungrounded conductors, a grounded conductor, and an equipment grounding conductor. The grounded conductor is bonded to the electrode grounding conductor at the meter socket only and is kept separate from the equipment grounding conductors at the main service panel. The equipment grounding conductors are connected to the ground busbar at the main service panel and provide a low impedance path for fault current to quickly trip the overcurrent protection devices. This configuration ensures that the electrical system is properly grounded and bonded, minimizing the risk of electrical shock and fire. It is essential to adhere to these requirements to maintain a safe and reliable electrical system. If there is any doubt, it is always recommended to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and standards. The correct implementation of grounding and bonding practices is paramount in electrical safety. Incorrectly installed or inadequately maintained grounding systems can lead to serious hazards, including electrical shock, fire, and equipment damage. The NEC provides detailed guidelines on how to properly ground and bond electrical systems, and it is crucial to follow these guidelines carefully. Grounding ensures that there is a lower impedance path for fault current to return to the source, while bonding ensures that all metal parts of the electrical system are at the same potential, minimizing the risk of shock. In addition to the single-point bonding requirement, there are other important considerations for grounding and bonding electrical services. For example, the size of the electrode grounding conductor must be appropriately sized based on the size of the service entrance conductors, as specified in NEC Table 250.66. The electrode grounding conductor must be securely connected to the grounding electrode system, using approved methods such as exothermic welding or listed connectors. The grounding electrode system must consist of one or more electrodes, such as a ground rod, a metal water pipe, or a concrete encased electrode, as specified in NEC Section 250.52. The equipment grounding conductors must be properly connected to all metal enclosures and equipment, using approved methods such as grounding screws or bonding jumpers. The equipment grounding conductors must be sized according to NEC Table 250.122, based on the rating of the overcurrent protection device. It is also important to ensure that there are no unintentional grounds in the electrical system. An unintentional ground can occur when a conductor comes into contact with a grounded metal surface. This can create a parallel path for current to flow, which can interfere with the proper operation of the electrical system and increase the risk of electrical shock. To prevent unintentional grounds, it is important to carefully inspect all wiring and connections and to ensure that all conductors are properly insulated. If an unintentional ground is suspected, it should be immediately investigated and corrected. In summary, grounding and bonding are critical aspects of electrical safety. By following the guidelines in the NEC and consulting with a qualified electrician, it is possible to ensure that electrical systems are properly grounded and bonded, minimizing the risk of electrical shock and fire. The 4-wire service requirement when bonding the grounded conductor at the meter socket is just one example of the many important considerations for grounding and bonding electrical services. Attention to detail and adherence to best practices are essential for maintaining a safe and reliable electrical system. Now let's consider a situation where you have an outbuilding that needs electrical service from a main building. The same principles of grounding and bonding apply, but there are some additional considerations. If the outbuilding is supplied by feeder from the main building, the feeder must include an equipment grounding conductor, in addition to the ungrounded conductors and the grounded conductor. The equipment grounding conductor must be sized according to NEC Table 250.122, based on the rating of the overcurrent protection device protecting the feeder. At the outbuilding, the grounded conductor should be isolated from the equipment grounding conductors. This means that the neutral busbar should be separate from the ground busbar. The equipment grounding conductors should be connected to the ground busbar, which is connected to a grounding electrode system at the outbuilding. The grounding electrode system at the outbuilding should consist of one or more electrodes, such as a ground rod or a ground ring. The purpose of isolating the grounded conductor from the equipment grounding conductors at the outbuilding is to prevent circulating current on the grounding path. If the grounded conductor were connected to the equipment grounding conductors at both the main building and the outbuilding, it would create a parallel path for current to flow, which could create noise and potentially dangerous voltage differences. By isolating the grounded conductor at the outbuilding, the only path for fault current to return to the source is through the equipment grounding conductor. This ensures that fault current is quickly and safely conducted back to the main building, where it can trip the overcurrent protection device. There are some exceptions to the requirement to isolate the grounded conductor at the outbuilding. For example, If the outbuilding is supplied by a single circuit and there is no metallic path between the main building and the outbuilding, the grounded conductor may be connected to the equipment grounding conductors at the outbuilding. However, in most cases, it is best to isolate the grounded conductor to prevent circulating currents and ensure proper grounding and bonding. In addition to the grounding and bonding requirements, there are also requirements for overcurrent protection at the outbuilding. The feeder supplying the outbuilding must be protected by an overcurrent protection device at the main building. The size of the overcurrent protection device must be appropriate for the size of the feeder conductors. At the outbuilding, there must be a main disconnect to shut off power to the entire outbuilding. The main disconnect must be readily accessible and must be marked to indicate its purpose. The outbuilding may also have branch circuits to supply power to lighting, receptacles, and equipment. The branch circuits must be protected by overcurrent protection devices, such as circuit breakers or fuses. The size of the overcurrent protection devices must be appropriate for the size of the branch circuit conductors. All wiring at the outbuilding must comply with the NEC and other applicable codes and standards. It is important to use approved wiring methods and materials and to follow all installation instructions carefully. If there is any doubt about how to properly wire the outbuilding, it is best to consult with a qualified electrician. In summary, providing electrical service to an outbuilding requires careful attention to grounding, bonding, and overcurrent protection. The grounded conductor should typically be isolated from the equipment grounding conductors at the outbuilding to prevent circulating currents. The feeder supplying the outbuilding must be protected by an overcurrent protection device at the main building, and there must be a main disconnect at the outbuilding. All wiring must comply with the NEC and other applicable codes and standards. By following these guidelines, it is possible to provide safe and reliable electrical service to an outbuilding. Now let's discuss another important aspect of electrical safety, which is arc flash protection. An arc flash is a dangerous electrical explosion that can occur when there is a fault in an electrical system. An arc flash can generate intense heat, pressure, and light, and can cause serious burns, injuries, and even death. Arc flashes can occur in any electrical system, but they are more common in high-voltage systems. Arc flashes can be caused by a variety of factors, including accidental contact with energized equipment, insulation failure, and equipment malfunction. To protect workers from arc flash hazards, it is important to implement appropriate safety measures. These measures can include engineering controls, such as installing arc-resistant equipment and providing remote racking systems. Administrative controls, such as developing safe work procedures and providing training on arc flash hazards. Personal protective equipment or PPE, such as arc-rated clothing, gloves, and face shields. The selection of PPE should be based on the incident energy level of the potential arc flash. The incident energy level is the amount of energy that a worker would be exposed to in the event of an arc flash. The incident energy level can be calculated using arc flash hazard analysis software or can be estimated using tables in the NEC. Arc-rated clothing is designed to protect workers from the heat of an arc flash. Arc-rated clothing is typically made from flame-resistant materials that will not melt or ignite when exposed to high temperatures. Arc-rated gloves are designed to protect workers from electrical shock and burns. Arc-rated gloves are typically made from insulating materials that can withstand high voltages. Arc-rated face shields are designed to protect workers from the intense light and pressure of an arc flash. Arc-rated face shields are typically made from impact-resistant materials that will not shatter or break when exposed to high forces. In addition to PPE, it is important to de-energize equipment whenever possible before working on it. De-energizing equipment eliminates the risk of arc flash. Before de-energizing equipment, it is important to verify that the equipment is actually de-energized. This can be done using a voltage tester. The voltage tester should be used to test each phase conductor to ground into each other. If there is any voltage present, the equipment is not de-energized. Once the equipment is de-energized, it should be locked out and tagged out. Lockout/tag-out procedures are designed to prevent the equipment from being accidentally energized while work is being performed on it. Lockout involves placing a lock on the disconnecting means to prevent it from being closed. Tagout involves placing a tag on the disconnecting means to warn others that the equipment is de-energized and should not be energized. In summary, arc flash protection is an essential aspect of electrical safety. By implementing appropriate safety measures, it is possible to protect workers from the hazards of arc flash. These measures include engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment. It is also important to energize equipment whenever possible before working on it and to follow lockout/tagout procedures to prevent the equipment from being accidentally energized. Now let's shift the focus to surge protection. Electrical surges, also known as transient voltages, are brief spikes in voltage that can damage or destroy electronic equipment. These surges can originate from various sources, including lightning strikes, utility switching, and internal equipment operation. Surge protective devices, or SPD, are designed to protect electrical equipment from these damaging surges by diverting the excess voltage to ground. SPD are available in a variety of types and configurations, each suited for different applications and levels of protection. The NEC requires surge protection in specific situations, particularly in dwelling units and critical systems. The most common type of SPD is the metal oxide varstor, or MOV. MOV are voltage-dependent resistors that exhibit a high resistance at normal operating voltages but a low resistance when subjected to a surge. This allows them to quickly divert the surge current to ground, protecting the connected equipment. SPD are typically installed at the service entrance to protect the entire electrical system from external surges. They can also be installed at branch circuits to protect individual pieces of equipment. When selecting an SPD, it is important to consider the following factors. The voltage rating of the SPD must be compatible with the voltage of the electrical system. The surge current capacity of the SPD must be sufficient to handle the expected surge currents. The SPD should have a low let-through voltage, which is the maximum voltage that the SPD will allow to pass through to the protected equipment. The SPD should have a visible indicator to show when it has been damaged or has reached the end of its service life. The SPD should be listed by a recognized testing laboratory such as Underwriters Laboratories or UL. There are three main types of SPD. Type 1 SPD are designed for installation at the service entrance before the main overcurrent protection device. Type 1 SPD are typically used in commercial and industrial applications. Type 2 SPD are designed for installation at the load side of the service entrance overcurrent protection device or at distribution panels. Type 2 SPD are commonly used in residential, commercial, and industrial applications. Type 3 SPD are designed for installation at the point of use, such as at a receptacle or a piece of equipment. Type 3 SPD are typically used to protect sensitive electronic equipment. When installing an SPD, it is important to follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully. The SPD should be properly grounded to provide a low impedance path for the surge current to ground. The SPD should be installed in a location where it is protected from physical damage and environmental conditions. SPD are an important part of a comprehensive electrical safety plan. By protecting electrical equipment from surges, SPD can help to prevent damage, downtime, and safety hazards. In summary, surge protection is a critical aspect of electrical safety. Surge protective devices, or SPD, are designed to protect electrical equipment from damaging surges by diverting the excess voltage to ground. SPD are available in a variety of types and configurations, each suited for different applications and levels of protection. When selecting and installing an SPD, it is important to consider the voltage rating, surge current capacity, let-through voltage, and listing of the SPD. SPD are an important part of a comprehensive electrical safety plan and can help to prevent damage, downtime, and safety hazards.